Good morning and welcome to everyone. We are excited. We are just overjoyed to have you in our presence today. We would like to give a special thanks to our sister library, Epps Memorial Library, for having us and welcoming us. Now, the Southwest Louisiana Genealogical and Historical Library will present to you the life and legacy of Doretha Combre. We ask that we all silence our cell phones as we begin the program. At some point, we will have a 5 to 10 minute break to stretch and look around this beautiful facility. At the end of the program, we will have time for comments from the Combre family and from the audience as well. Today, our speaker is none other than my coworker, Mrs. Joyce Saunier. Joyce has been with the Genealogy Library since 2015. She has a degree in history from McNeese State University. At present, working on a dual degree, which includes MLIS and a graduate certificate in archival studies. I am thrilled to always introduce this young lady. To you, we present to you Mrs. Joyce Marie Saunier.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me well? All right, so thank you all for coming. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. Before I go into my presentation, I want to give a special thank you to the Combre family. A special shout out to Mr. Warren Combre Jr. He was kind enough to let me and my coworker Armagine interview him about the family and the family businesses. And I want to give a special thank you to the wonderful staff at Combre Funeral Home because they were super busy the day we came and they were so kind to talk to us and give us a little tidbits about their business and also allow me to take pictures in their funeral home. So thank y'all for that. And of course, I have to thank my coworker Armagine because she has always been there and always been my greatest supporter. So thank you. It's not happening today. This happened in my last program and it's not happening today. Okay, so I'm gonna just go straight into the presentation. In the early to mid 1900s here in Lake Charles, I feel like y'all can't hear me. There was an emergence of legacy African American families moving here that consisted of professional businessmen, women, as well as pioneering educators. And one of those legacy families that migrated here to Lake Charles would become ingrained in our city's history for years to come. And that family was no other than the Combre family. And in that family was a matriarch who defied all the odds that were stacked against her. Her name was Doretha Alma Dardenne Combre. And she became our city's light throughout some of its darkest times. So, it is my honor to share with you the life and legacy of Doretha Combre. What do we know of Doretha's origin stories? Well, her known birthday is April 26, 1898, and she was born in Rosedale, Louisiana, which is in Iberville Parish. Iberville. So here's a brief documented genealogy journey of Doretha Combre's origins. So I have a few documents clipped out here on the screen. Now, according to Doretha's marriage record, her mother's first name was Grace, and I have that image to the top left of the screen up here. And on Grace's death certificate, her documented name was Grace Holmes, which is to the right of the screen. And I did find that Holmes was actually her mother's married name. Her mom married a man named Boston Holmes whenever she died. But on Doretha's death certificate, her mother's maiden name was Guidry. So Doretha's mom is coming from the Guidrys, coming out of that area. And the informant on that death certificate was her eldest son, Theophil Combre Jr. Now, as for Doretha's father's name, she provided the name Kit Dardenne on her marriage record. However, on her death certificate, the father's name was left unknown, which means that her eldest son didn't know much information to even provide that. So the only documented information we have right now concerning her father's name is coming from her on that marriage record. So what we have is a man named Kit Dardenne. So naturally, I wanted to find Doretha on a census record because that'll help me piece together some things, And we have to take the information. So now I'm about to go on a genealogy thing. So I have to take the information I already know because not much was known about her side of the family going in. So one thing I know, 1898, I know that's the birth year. I know for a fact her mom is Grace Guidry, so I'm looking for a woman named Grace Guidry if I'm looking in a census record, and hopefully I can connect a Kit somewhere because that's the information she's given us about her father. So after doing some research, I came across this 1900 census record. This is the census index here. This is a Grace Guidry, age 25, and she's living with her daughter, who is a Dardenne, or Dardenne, living in Iberville Parish. Here's the crazy part, though. The name, if you look, is Dorcher Dardenne. However, you got to think about accents. Census taker going by the house, and Dardenne. The reason why I keep saying that name different because when I look it up, it's a French surname. So you got to think about those accents. But in the household, this Grace Guidry has a daughter who is listed as Dorcher Dardenne, and she is 8 years old. And guess what? And these are all African Americans in the household. They have a servant in their house. Thaddeus Williams, 45 years old, a servant living in their house. That was definitely an interesting find. But I'm more concerned about this little girl who I think could be our Doretha. Now, this is the actual census record. I clipped it out for y'all. And if you look, I can see, because sometimes when you look at census indexes, the volunteers who write the name, it could be misspelled. But it does look like they wrote what they saw. It does say Dorcher, Dardenne. So, let's go back to this index. The 1900 census is the only released census during that time that provides a month and a year. Well, guess what? Nobody in this household gave either one. So, if this is true, if this could be our Doretha, that would mean her known birth year of 1898 is incorrect, because if this little girl is 8 years old, as was told to the census, that would mean her birth year was between 1892 and 1893, correct? And if April is actually her birth month, that would make it more so 1893. But y'all, guess what? I was already questioning 1898. You want to know why? Because Doretha had me questioning 1898 herself. This is a clip part from her marriage record. A clip part from her marriage record from 1919. Guess what she wrote? She was 24 years old in 1919. So that would make her born around 1894. For sure, 1895 April is that month. So if that little girl on that 1900 census is truly her, then that would mean even this marriage record would be incorrect concerning her birth year. But what do we all know from piecing all of this evidence and documents together that 1898 is most likely not correct? You got to think about things like this. When you're going that far back, usually the only birth records you have, and Armagine, you correct me on this, is usually which is church records. So if you wasn't being recorded in those church records, and a lot of times, and have come across it a lot of them didn't exactly know their exact birth date, which would explain why a birth year or month wasn't even provided on that 1900 census. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm sharing this information because it's something that should be acknowledged concerning what is publicly known about Doretha's history. So I do believe from a researcher's perspective, there's a great possibility that that 8-year-old girl is our Doretha. One, her mom name is Grace Guidry on there. Two, we're in her home parish. And that Dardenne, whichever way you want to pronounce it, is not a common surname. So, with all that pieced together, I truly feel that that is our Doretha in that household. But again, that's from a researcher's perspective. Now, as far as her father goes, that is the only documented information as of right now. She obviously knew her dad enough to put, and then to me, Kit almost sounds like a nickname. So who's to say she just knew him as Kit? And I did search for a Kit, and I'm gonna be real with you. Different Kits I found were mostly like French white men from that area, which after talking to some family members there, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, they were never told anything about her father, but there were always rumors that her dad was probably a French white man, which, remember, they got a servant in their household in 1900. So that tells you Doretha was in a class, like a higher class, coming up. So, but for right now, Kit kind of remains a mystery. But we have a name. But let's learn a little bit more about Doretha when she gets older. Later in Doretha's life, she will meet her future husband while attending college in New Orleans. And he was Dr. Theophile Albert Combre Sr. Little background on Theophile Combre. He was born May 11, 1890 in Hahnville, Louisiana, which is in St. Charles Parish. And he is one of 7 children to Alfred and Josephine Combre. Theophile attended Straight University in New Orleans, which is now Dillard University, and it was there that he met Doretha, where she was attending New Orleans University. And according to the Pittsburgh Courier, dated January 7, 1956, it stated that Doretha was the president of her graduating class at New Orleans University in 1914. And this was another good find. So after Theophile attended college in New Orleans, he furthered his education by attending medical school at Mahara Medical College. So right here on the screen is an article from the Nashville Banner newspaper dated May 4th, 1917, and the heading reads, Mahara closing exercises held. Large medical class received diplomas, and here notable speakers, and Dr. Theophile Combre was among that graduating class. And I also want to, if you want to really get really specific, this article states that the commencement was on a Thursday. So if this article was dated Friday, May 4th, that would mean Dr. Theophile Albert Combre graduated from Mahara Medical College May 3rd, 1917. So, and yeah, I clipped out his portion so y'all can see his name was circled right there. 2 years after Theophile Combre graduated from Mahara Medical College, he and Doretha married on June 18, 1919 in Rapides Parish. And on the screen is a full copy of the marriage license and record, which I saw a piece of that from her age and her father's information from earlier. And the two of them settled in Oakdale, Louisiana, and it was there that Theophile began going by, because you start to see him as Dr. T.A. Combre a lot when he's documented. And he started his own practice there in Oakdale. Are y'all hearing me okay? I feel like I'm straining. Okay. So right here I have a 1920 census index, and it shows Dr. Theophile Combre and Doretha living together in Oakdale. And Dr. Combre is listed as a doctor on that census, even though I don't have his information up there, but they have it his occupation is listed as a doctor. And Doretha is listed as a school teacher. And guess what? She taught school at Allen Parish Training School in Oakdale. And I came across another good find. I'm not reading this whole article, I'm just explaining it. So this article was published in the Oakdale Journal newspaper, dated February 17, 2011. And I'm gonna give this great tidbit out for y'all in case y'all wanna look this up. They have great information on this website. It's the African American high schools in Louisiana before 1970. You can I have the website up there and it's exactly how I said it. They have all the different African American high schools before that time period. So what's great about this article is it gives amazing information on the Allen Parish Training School, and they had Doretha's name mentioned twice in this article. So, some cool little tidbits. Her name was listed under the faculty members section for the 1925-26 class, and it shows that she taught history at Allen Parish. And I thought this was fun. The second time her name is mentioned in the article, someone shared a memory about Mrs. Combre and her class making popcorn balls and cooking other things they could sell to help raise money for the school. So, the Combre family moved to Lake Charles in 1926. Dr. Theophile Combre believed that having his practice here would prove to be more profitable for his business. Now, why is that? Well, there were many African Americans coming to the city due to jobs becoming available because of the newly opened port of Lake Charles, which opened in 1926. So you have a lot of African Americans now migrating into the city for work. And on this screen, I thought it was a nice image to share. It is from the Louisiana Digital Library, uploaded by McNeese State Archives. And it's an image that presents an area view of that opening day of the port of Lake Charles in 1926. And this is the scene. It depicts ships that are docked in large crowds. And again, the Combre family has made their way into the city during this time. All right, so where were they living? So this is an image from a Lake Charles City directory. We have these inside our library. They're an amazing source when doing any kind of research. It shows here that Theophile, who's listed as a doctor, well, it says physician, yeah, living with his wife Doretha. Now, there's two addresses. The 601 Boulevard address was actually the family home at that time. But that second address was the address of his practice, 201 and a half Boulevard. Now, I found out some really cool stuff, y'all, because I went further. Y'all, some people may know it, but I was like, I pieced something really cool. Okay, so I decided to look in that same city directory in the address section, because in city directories, you can look up by address, names, businesses. So it shows that Theophile practice was shared at the same address with a C.J. Boston, who is listed as a dentist. Now, during that time, who are the prominent Bostons in this area? African American Bostons, definitely, you know. Okay, so after doing some research, I found this C.J. Boston's obituary. He died in 1970 in Clarksville, Texas. And I found that C.J. Boston listed here with T.A. Combre was Dr. Clarence Joseph Boston, and yes, he was the son of Professor William Oscar Boston, better known as Professor W.O. Boston, who founded First Ward Colored School in 1907 here. So this is just an example of these prominent Black businessmen at that time working together. So, and also too in his obituary, it did mention that he practiced dentistry, the C.J. Boston. He practiced dentistry in Lake Charles before moving to Clarksville. And fun fact, he also graduated from Mahara Medical School as well in 1924. And it was during this time period that Dr. Combre and Doretha already had 3 children when they moved here in 1926. So let's go through those names. All right. From left to right to the top, we have Theophil Albert Combre Jr., born June 23rd, 1920, died December 6, 1965. We have Grace Josephine Combre, married name was Moore when she passed away, born August 20th, 1922, died December 19, 2016. Then we have Doris Marjorie Combre Harrigan, born August 5th, 1924, died April 11, 1981. Bottom row, left to right, Gwendolyn Mabel Combre, married name was Gary when she passed away. Born October 10th, 1927, died March 23rd, 2024, and she was actually the last of Doretha and Theophil's children to pass away. And we have our very own Warren Houston Combre Sr., born January 25th, 1930, died November 25th, 1995, and a fun fact that was shared with me is that he was named after the Warren Methodist Church, which was the church home of Doretha. And her 6th child was Doretha Alma Combre, married name Harris. And yes, she gave her daughter the exact same name as hers. And y'all, I'm gonna tell y'all, it challenged me during my research because I kept getting her when I was trying to look for Doretha. So you're gonna notice here that I provided 2 birth years. So I have born July 14th, 1933 or 34. Sorry, born February 4th. Sorry, yes, February 4th, 1933 or 34. Her obituary announcement said 1933. However, I found her marriage record and she gave her birth year as 1934. So that's why I provided both, but I feel like 1934 is accurate because she gave that herself when she got married. And she died July 14th, 2021. That's what I have, yes. So that was the 6 children of Dr. Theophil Combre and Doretha Alma Combre. So here's a 1930 census, which shows the Combre children for the first time appearing with their parents, minus their youngest one because she was born after the 1930 census. So in this household, it consists of Theophil, Doretha, and their 5 children. And also in this household, you will see a Rita, which I have her name over there. She's the last one. Rita Williams, and she is listed as the aunt to the head of the household. Well, even the head of the household is T.A. Combre on here. However, that was not his aunt. That was Doretha's biological aunt. I verified that information because I was curious, because I was like, let me look up this Rita Williams. And sure enough, she shared the same parents with Doretha's mom, Grace Guidry. And Doretha was the niece who was informant on Rita's. So that's something, too, if you're looking at that, that can confuse someone thinking that was on the Combre family line. But that was actually Doretha's family lines right there. And another thing, you're going to see I marked out 54. Here's a lesson. When you look at these census indexes, volunteers are writing what they see on the actual record. I looked at the record. It had 34 years old. Someone saw 54. So she was actually 34, which makes more sense in that household. So, as I mentioned, this is the first time you start to see the children, everyone together. But sadly, this is the last time Dr. Theophil Combre will appear on a census record with his family. Tragedy hits home for the Combre family, the untimely death of Dr. Theophil A. Combre Sr. Dr. Combre passed away on March 12, 1937 in Carlville, Texas at the age of 46. On the screen is his obituary from the Lake Charles American Press dated March 15, 1937. And I'm going to read his obit, but before I do that, I want to make a note. The obit says he was 45. However, his Texas issued death certificate, which was signed by Doretha, does say that he was 46 and 10 months at the time of his passing. So, bear with me. Hopefully I don't stumble. Okay. Services today for colored physician of city who died Friday. Funeral services for Dr. T.A. Combre, 45, colored physician who died in Carville, Texas, were set for 2:30 this afternoon from the Warren Methodist Church, with burial to follow in the colored cemetery. Dr. Combre had practiced in Lake Charles since 1926 and was considered a competent physician by other doctors of the city hospital. Attaches state that he was an astute dietitianist and he was he was the president of the Southwest Medical Association of Louisiana and a worker in the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Surviving him was his wife, 6 children, father, and 1 sister. And according to his death certificate, he died of tuberculosis. With the death of Dr. Theophile A. Combre emerges a new chapter for the Combre family. After the death of her husband, Doretha decided to update her teaching certificate so she can teach anywhere. She attended Xavier Extension College, which was conducted at Sacred Heart. And she began teaching school at night, all while selling insurance during the day to take care of her family, to ensure they all get a proper education. This all happened to her unexpectedly. And here on the screen is a 1940 census record index, and it does show Doretha is now the head of her household. And in that house is all 6 of her children, her father-in-law, Alfred Combre, as well as her aunt, Rita Williams.
And it was spelled Cambry?
Oh, another lesson in census records, names will be misspelled. Because matter of fact, I've seen Cam sometimes when looking up Combre. So it is Combre. Yeah. Now, 1940 is the year that will mark the beginning of one of the family legacy business. Which brings me to highlighting a brief history of the Combre family namesake businesses that are still operating in Lake Charles today, which are Combre Funeral Home and Combre Memorial Park. Here on the screen is a clipping from the 1941 city directory. Doretha is listed as the owner of Combre Funeral Home, and it also shows that she worked for Agent Louisiana Industrial Life Insurance Company. And I did some research on that insurance company because I was curious about that, being that she worked for it. Turns out that was a Black-owned insurance company that was founded in New Orleans in 1920. So, in the same 1941 city directory, her son Theophile Combre Jr., who went by T.A., correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he went by T.A. Combre, is listed as an undertaker at Combre Funeral Home. And he was also an agent at Benevolent Service Burial Insurance. Now, during this time, Theophile Jr. was only 19 years old. He graduated from mortician school. However, he could not take on the role as an embalmer because you have to be at least 21 years of age to take that on. So, Doretha hired someone else to do the embalming until her son could do it himself. So I'm going to reference an article from the Lake Charles American Press titled Combre Family Story, One of Pride and Strength. It was published June 14, 1992, and was written by Nola Mae Ross. I also want to note this article is framed inside of Combre Funeral Home as well. In the article, Warren Combre Sr. provided information saying that his mother, Doretha, hired a man by the name of Grant Williams to do the embalming in the beginning years at Combre Funeral Home. Warren Sr. goes on to further reveal that Grant Williams was one of Lake Charles's first morticians, And he even owned his own funeral home at the intersection of Railroad Avenue and Pine Street. So naturally, the researcher in me was like, I got to find out who this Grant Williams is. And in my journey of trying to find Grant Williams, I came across some early African-American funeral homes and directors, which lead me to what I call honorable mentions. Presenting history of some of the first documented Black undertakers and funeral homes in Lake Charles. Just a brief little interlude right here. So the first time I found Grant Williams, who again, first embalmer at Combre Funeral Home, was in this 1913 city directory, which I have pointed out at the very top. Grant is listed as a secretary and treasurer at Lake Charles Comfort Burial Association. And here at the bottom of the screen, I have a clipping of just the undertaker section in that same 1913 city directory. And it shows that Lake Charles Comfort Burial was located at 219.5 Clarence Street. And in case anyone may not know, which I'm sure you do, that lowercase c in parentheses next to the funeral home indicates that it was a colored funeral home. So, I also want to point out, you see I have circled right here, there are two other Black funeral homes listed in that section as well, so I want to recognize those. The other two are Southwestern Mercantile Company and True Faith Burial Association, both located at 217 Franklin. But my focus is on Grant because he the one led me to all this, right? So I want to look at Lake Charles Comfort Burial Funeral Home because that's where Grant is. So I want to see the first time I see this funeral home. The first time I see it is 1911, 1912 City Directory, 219 Franklin Street, under the Undertaker and Funeral Homes colored, and this time they wrote it, section in the City Directory. But guess what? Under that funeral home, there is a listing for a Undertaker / Black-owned funeral home by a man named E.P. Smith, located on 1103 Jackson Street. So is everybody keeping up with me? Because I'm trying to figure out who was the first coming in. So I want to know who this E.P. Smith is. So I looked him up in that same city directory, and I found that he was listed at 1103 Jackson Street. They're actually renting that as their home. And guess what? Remember, they have it listed under the Undertaker section. And he is with his wife, who they have listed as Pearlie. And I remember talking to Ermagine about this. I was like, I think I probably found definitely for sure one, if not the first funeral home morticians here, because I have the census. His name was Evander P. Smith. This is a 1910 census, y'all. And he and his wife Pearl, because remember, there was a Pearlie in that city directory, are living here in Lake Charles with their children, Eula and Evander Smith Jr., and his occupation is an undertaker, and he owned his establishment. That's 1910. Now, 10 years later, 1920, he's not here in Lake Charles anymore. Matter of fact, I found him in Rapides Parish. But this definitely is evidence to show that, I'm not saying he was the first, but he's definitely pinpointed as being one of the first ones here coming into the funeral home business, African-American businessmen coming here. So Evander P. Smith. But let's go back to our guy, Grant Williams. This is a 1917 city directory. Mr. Williams is now listed as the president and manager of that Lake Charles Comfort Burial Association. And you remember in that article, Warren Combre Sr. quoted saying, Grant Williams eventually had his own funeral home. Well, I found it. In 1934, this is the 1934 city directory, Grant Williams is listed owning his own funeral home called Williams Funeral Home, and it was located at 1212 Pine Street. Remember, 1934. So this is, again, researcher's perspective. This is most likely the same location where Lake Charles Comfort Burial Association was, because this location for the funeral home for Lake Charles Burial Association had Southside Pine Street. It never had a number. So it's more than likely, being that Mr. Williams was already the president and manager there, he just turned that into his own business and called it Williams Funeral Home. So, and I also want to acknowledge, you see I have two arrows up there. There are two other African American name undertakers there. One is Marge Shorter, whose location was listed at 217 Franklin. And another one who was listed was Matthew Thomas, and he was listed at 130 Gray Street. So that is my little brief history of some of the first documented Black undertakers here. So Combre Funeral Home emerged into the funeral home business amongst many that were operating in the Lake Charles area, and it became one of the longest prospering businesses in Lake Charles history, y'all. 1940, 2026. Which all began with Doretha Combre as the head woman in charge. And here on the screen is a Combre funeral home advertisement from the 1945 City Directory, and it does show a Mrs. D.A. Combre as the owner of the business. So y'all, Black woman, 1940, civil rights. She got her name advertised on her business in the city directories. All right, a lot going on here, but this is a 1948-49 Lake Charles City Directory, and it shows that Doretha is not only the owner of Combre Funeral Home, but she is also the owner of Combre Flower Shop, and this is the first time the flower shop appears in those city directories. So 1948-49. And also in that same one, I have it circled, her son, Theophil Combre Jr., is now listed as the manager of Combre Funeral Home. Okay. So here are two ads from a 1952 city directory. The Combre Funeral Home are advertising for a flower and gift shop now, along with their funeral home. So their flower and gift shop advertisement says, "Make flowers an everyday affair, not an occasion. We mail and wire flowers, cut flowers, plants, and gifts." And for the Combre Funeral Home advertisement, it says, "Funerals of distinction, burial insurance policies for the entire family, and ambulance service." Okay, we good? Okay. So in this very same 1952 city directory with these ads, I have to recognize Ms. Doris Combre Harrigan. So in 1952, it shows she was employed at Combre Flower and Gift Shop. It was the first time it shows her being just documented. I'm gonna say that, because I'm sure the kids were all in the businesses beforehand, but this is the first time she's documented working in the family business, in the flower shop. And it also shows she was the secretary for Combre Funeral Home. Again, this is 1952. Ultimately, Doris takes over that flower shop, and in the 1963 city directory, which is the one towards the bottom, it does list her as the owner of Combre Flower and Gift Shop, with her name in parentheses next to it. So, 1952 is a very significant milestone for Doretha and the 6 children, because, before I get there, I can't get too ahead of myself. There's one more business Doretha was in charge of. She was doing everything, y'all. I found this in 1956. Combre family was running their own insurance company, y'all. It was called Combre Sacred Hope Insurance Company, and Doretha A. Combre is listed as the owner of that business. So 1956. Okay, now we're gonna bring it back to 1952. All right, like I said, 1952 is a milestone in the Combre family's legacy here in Lake Charles because this is the beginning of Combre Memorial Park's legacy here. And I have these handouts at the back table, in case any of y'all have it. I'm gonna just read this one. Plans for opening a new colored graveyard, Combre Memorial Park Cemetery, were announced today by Mrs. Doretha A. Combre, widow of the late Dr. T.A. Combre, in whose memory the cemetery will be dedicated. Outlining the setup, the Combre attorneys said the 10-acre tract was purchased by the widow and 6 children from New Light Missionary and Baptist Association and located at the corner of Opelousas and Brammer Road. The land will be divided into approximately 10,000 grave plots and the tract sufficiently improved for opening within the next 2 weeks, attorneys said. 1952, everyone. So, I'm not going to read this one, but I do have this as a handout for everyone. Now, this was Combre Memorial Park dedication ceremony article that was published in the American Press on October 21st, 1952. And that ceremony took place on Sunday, October 19th, 1952. But I found something else because guess what? They made it all the way to Pittsburgh. So this was another article. It was published in the New Pittsburgh Carrier. And so Combre Memorial Park was a big deal, African-American business. But I'm gonna talk more about that later. But Doretha she was a national civil rights champion. So it makes sense why it was published. So before I go on from the Combre Memorial Park and funeral home, I want to discuss an important role the Combre family played in the community in 1957. And it was after Hurricane Audrey hit in Southwest Louisiana. I felt like this was too important not to highlight about the family. On the screen is the front page from the Lake Charles American Press dated June 27, 1957. The heading reads, Hurricane Hits Entire Southwest Area. On June 27, 1957, Hurricane Audrey hit the Southwest Louisiana coast and Cameron Parish received the hardest hit from the storm. And there were many unidentified victims from that storm. And due to segregation at this time, there was one cemetery to bury the unidentified white victims and one to bury the unidentified black victims. And Combre Memorial Park took on the role of burying the unidentified black victims from that hurricane. I'm trying not to get emotional. I told my coworker I got emotional reading some of this stuff. Okay. There's 2 article clippings up here. The article clipping to the left here is from the Sacramento Union out of Sacramento, California, July 2nd, 1957. The heading reads, Hurricane Survivors Stare at Mass Grave. Now that heading, you can refer to the picture over to the right of the screen over here. It's the Herald Sun out of Durham, North Carolina. Same date, July 2nd of 57. So I'm going to read just a little bit from the Sacramento article. These were the unidentified victims of Hurricane Audrey, buried in segregated cemeteries, one for Negroes, one for whites. At Highland Memorial Gardens, a Roman Catholic priest speaking in French told the survivors that God only knows why the hurricane destroyed Cameron. At Combre Memorial Park for Negroes, one woman in a white dress was led screaming from the huge pit. No, 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 no. she cried. 40 crudely made pine boxes rested on top of the long semi-trailer flatbed trucks before the ceremonies at Combre. Slowly, a huge crane lifted and placed them in a 150-foot-long ditch. Besides these, funeral director S.G. Gilmore Jr. said there were 56 others which he hoped to bury today. The women in the crowd held handkerchiefs to their noses. Men who worked with the coffins wore gauze masks. The brilliant hot sun baked the hundreds waiting during the slow burial. And the caption underneath the picture reads, "Scores of relatives and friends gather around a huge common grave in Combre Memorial Park, Lake Charles, Louisiana. As pine coffins holding the victims of Hurricane Audrey are lowered into the ground, 50 Negro victims of the savage storm were buried side by side in one grave. Burial for white victims took place at another cemetery." I want to briefly share this with you. I was contemplating it, but I feel like it was important because it gives you a true glimpse at what people like the Combre family and their counterparts were facing on the front lines. So this article is from the Atlanta Journal. It was actually published May 29, 1994, and it covers the events after Hurricane Audrey, and Warren Combre Sr. was quoted in this article. So I'm going to read his small portion. I will warn you, and you can kind of read, it is kind of graphic, but again, it paints the picture of what everyone was dealing with during this aftermath. Warren Combre Sr., whose family ran a funeral home in Lake Charles, was summoned to help. "I picked up one of the first bodies that came in," Combre said. "They were waterlogged, swollen. I tried to pick up a body and the skin came off in my hands. All of them weren't identified. The ones that were turned over to their families and they got a decent burial. Others, way more than 100, Combre said, were buried in mass in a trench." And again, I wanted to share these articles because Combre Memorial Park, Combre Funeral Home, the Combre family itself have a distinctive history with Hurricane Audrey here in Southwest Louisiana. And that history should not be forgotten. It should always be remembered that the Combre family, along with their community counterparts, stepped up and served numerous families during this horrific time in our region. And here on the screen is a picture of the Hurricane Audrey monument that was at Combre Memorial Park. This picture is from 1999. The marker reads, "To cherish the memory of those beloved, heroic, unidentified citizens of Cameron Parish whose lives were taken by Hurricane Audrey, June 27, 1957. Today, that monument is not there. Warren Combre Jr. did share that Hurricane Laura did destroy it. But he was kind enough to allow my coworker Armagine and I, he showed us the area where those bodies were buried. And it's very emotional. It really is. Before I completely move on, I know I said before, but I want to recognize a couple of people who were shared with me. I asked, when I sat down and spoke with Warren Jr., I asked him, was there anybody in particular that you thought should be highlighted during those early years that people may have forgotten about? And two people in particular that he shared with me, it's just the names. I call this the Honorable Mentions Combre Funeral Home Spotlight Contributors and Staff the Early Years. The first name is Bartis Abraham Sr. He was born December 10, 1915, and he died March 28, 2005. Mr. Abraham was a well-known local insurance agent here in our area, and he worked with Doretha during those early years. Now, he was not an official member of the staff, but he was always there for the Combre family when needed. And I did a little bit further research on him, and it did show that on the 1950 census, his occupation was an embalmer and funeral home director. Also, his obituary mentioned that he held a mortician's license with the Louisiana State Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors. So the second name I have here, Jolie P., born April 9th, 1939, in my understanding, he's still with us today. He's 86 years old. He began working for Combre Funeral Home around the mid-1960s, and he worked with the family for 30 years. Now, during that time, Jolie P. worked for the Combre Funeral Home. Again, this story was shared with me by Warren Sr.'s son, Warren Jr. When Warren Sr. was running the family business, which he began running in the mid-1960s, he wanted an in-house embalmer instead of a trade embalmer. And Mr. Jolie P. was his man, who became his official embalmer in the funeral home. So guess what? When I was briefly researching these names, I came across a great find, and I just thought that was amazing to find this because I found an article with these two men together with Warren Sr. So this is a newspaper clipping from the Daily World out of Opelousas, Louisiana, dated November 13, 1977. And in this picture is all the gentlemen I just mentioned, Bartis Abraham and Jolie P., along with Warren Sr. The caption underneath reads, and you'll see I have an arrow pointing towards each one of them. Received scholarship, Donald D. Jackson, a student in mortuary science at McNeese State University, receives a scholarship from the Southwest Funeral Directors and Embalmers Association. From left are Joseph Mouton of Lafayette, Bartis Abraham of Lake Charles, Leonard Collins of Opelousas, Donald Jackson of Lake Charles, Jolie P. of Lake Charles, Chairman Robert J. Fenelon of Opelousas, and President and Warren H. Combre of Lake Charles. The scholarship is given annually to a student in mortuary science. So that was a pretty cool find. So, I want to give a special thanks to the current generation of the Combre family and the many contributors and their staff who have helped define the Combre family business's groundbreaking history that is still living on today here in Lake Charles. Here on the screen is a picture, in case y'all wondering. This picture is actually from the Louisiana Black Pages, Southwest edition. It was the 97-98 issue. We have those books here in our library. And in this picture, we have Doretha's grandsons. To the left is Warren Combre Jr. He is over Combre Memorial Park today, and to the right, who we have the blessing of having here with us today, is Mr. Marcus Combre, who is over Combre Funeral Home today, everyone. And I have to recognize the painting in the background. And this is their father, Doretha's son, Warren Combre Sr. He took over the family business after his brother, Theophile Combre Jr. And honestly, I feel like he deserves his own program because he was phenomenal. I truly am fascinated by him. But regarding both the Combre family businesses, to all of you who are here today representing the Combre family, I want to say thank you, and I genuinely mean that. Thank you for helping to continue this legacy that we cherish because it is important. And let's not forget, this all began with the matriarch herself, Doretha Combre, who was the ultimate businesswoman. Just 3 years after the passing of her husband, Doretha went back to school and established an enterprise family business that included a funeral home, flower and gift shop, cemetery, and insurance company. with 6 children. Yes, ma'am, you're right. They had an ambulance service. And in honor of Doretha's entrepreneurial groundbreaking success, there is a Doretha Combre Chapter National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, which was established sometime in the mid to late 1960s. And I actually found articles referencing that club around the late 1960s. So, here on the screen is a picture of the Combre family. This was courtesy of Warren Combre Jr. The picture is either spring or summer of 1958, and he did provide me with the names. I'm gonna go through them because I only think it's right to acknowledge. If I say a wrong name, y'all let me know, but I took this from my notes. Okay, we're gonna start with the bottom row, left to right. We got our girl Doretha, Dardenne Combre, Gwendolyn Combre, Gary, and she's holding her son Byron. Next to her is Ronald. And next to him is his mother, Grace Combre. And to the very end on the couch is Peggy Redham Loeb, who is the daughter of Grace Combre as well. All right, top row, left to right. We got Theophil T.A. Combre Jr., his daughter, Donna Combre Lamel, T.A. Combre Jr.'s second wife, Dolores Duhon Combre, and their son, T.A. Combre III, Robert Combre was Grace's son, y'all, Dolores Combre Harrigan, and her husband, Charles Harrigan Jr., and their son is right in front of them. Tell me if this is correct. This is what was told to me. It was Charles Harrigan III, but he went by Yogi. Okay. And on the very end is no other than Warren Combre Sr. and his wife, Gloria Banks Combre. And fun fact, she was expecting their daughter, Susan, in this picture. So, and if you notice in the background, we have picture frames in the back of Mr. Dr. Theophil Combre and Doretha. So, with everything that Doretha Combre accomplished, she brought her family with her, y'all. And here's the thing about her. She was not quiet. She was not still. She was a fighter. She fought for her family, and she fought for the many Black citizens who were targeted with injustices in our very own community, which led to Doretha becoming one of the pioneer figures during the height of the civil rights movement throughout the 1950s and 60s, which will be discussed after this break. Right now, I'm gonna give it over to my coworker, Armin Jean. All right, thank you all for coming back. I say y'all a lot. I guess that's the country in me, sorry. All right. In this portion of the presentation, I'm going to share with you a few highlights throughout Doretha's years as one of the headlining pioneers of the civil rights movement, which all began with her passion to improve education standards for African Americans in the South. So Doretha was an advocate for equal educational opportunities among African American students. And here on the screen, this is an older picture of Doretha's daughter, Gwen Combre Gary. And the quote underneath is from that Nola Mae Ross article that I referenced from the first part of the program. It refers to Gwen highlighting her mother's determination to make sure her children received a proper education. I wanted to go to LSU, says Gwen, but in 1949, they would not take Blacks. However, mother convinced them they had to pay my tuition and room and board if I went to Atlanta University, which I did. Now, during this time, Doretha's children attended college. Some of the colleges that they attended were in Louisiana, such as were outside of Louisiana, sorry. For example, Theophil Jr., T.A. Jr., and Doris, they attended college in Chicago. Their youngest daughter and child, Doretha, attended school in Tennessee State University. And right here in Louisiana, her daughter Grace attended Southern University in Baton Rouge, and her fifth and youngest son, Warren Sr., attended Dillard University in New Orleans. So Theophil, Doris, Warren, Doretha, the daughter, did not have any issues with college admissions. However, Gwen did not fare so well when she wanted to attend LSU in 1949. Nonetheless, Doretha always ensured that her children received an education, which was during a time when Black people were not permitted the same access to the same types of quality education as their white counterparts in various areas throughout the South, and Calcasieu Parish was no exception to that in that time period. But guess what? That didn't stop Doretha from pushing on to advocate for equal education rights for students in our area. In fact, it motivated her to push the limits towards something that had never been done before any Black person, not woman, person, during her time here in Lake Charles. Case in point, Doretha became the first of her race to run for school board in Lake Charles. This article is from the Beaumont Enterprise dated February 10th, 1953. Negro woman is seeking position on school board. Lake Charles, Louisiana, February 9th. Okay. A Negro woman qualified Monday as a candidate for the membership of the Lake Charles City School Board. She is Doretha Combre, who operates a funeral home and a flower and gift shop. She is believed to be the first member of her race ever to run for a city office. She is the first woman candidate to offer for the March 31 Democratic Party election. So, now, unfortunately, Doretha did not win that election. Doesn't matter. This was ambition that she took on. So I have something that I found that I thought was kind of interesting that I wanted to share with you, because anything I was finding with her that had her picture, I wanted to share that. So on the screen here is an article from the New Pittsburgh Courier dated August 8th, 1953. The heading reads, Ability, Belief, Courage Keynotes of Conference. The article referenced a leadership conference that was held at Southern University for the many who attended who were civil rights activists and leaders. And there were certificates recognizing first-class leadership that were handed out to these leaders. So the picture that is circled towards the bottom of the page, it has a number 5 on it. They had each picture numbered. I'm gonna read the caption that was there for it. It says, Mrs. Rowlands left and Mrs. Doretha A. Combre of Lake Charles are two who have something in common. Mrs. Rowlands made an unsuccessful bid for a seat of the Louisiana State Legislature, and Mrs. Combre failed to win a Board of Education post in her hometown. And the other picture I have circled, which I have cropped right there, it does not specifically say it's Doretha, but I think it's obvious that's our girl right there. And if you notice, she has her fists up in the air. This picture was in reference to people who were supporting Eleanor Rowlands for a leadership award at that conference. So, going back to Doretha's run for the school board, it was a monumental moment in our city's history, and it proved she was someone to contend with. When she made that decision to run for city office, she put herself on the front lines as someone who dared to go up against the odds and fight for a place on the school board. Also, she can have a voice for the Black students here in the Lake Charles education system. Doretha losing that election was not the end of her fight. So, all her resilience was proven through her actions with the NAACP. Doretha and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This is a portion of the program. I'm going to share with you a few articles that I found referencing Doretha's work with the NAACP statewide and locally. Not reading all that, but so this article clipping here on the screen is from the New Pittsburgh Courier, dated December 12th, 1953. The pic to the left, yes, the pic to the left is the front page of the newspaper with the heading EE Fund hits $13,000 mark. Had to do some research on this. So EE Fund during that time period in the 1950s referred to the Courier's EE Fund, which EE stood for Educational Equalization. And it was a fund established to help raise money to challenge the separate but equal doctrine in the public school systems. So, back to that article, to the right of the screen, I circled a portion of it because it mentioned Doretha there. And I'm going to read that. It's just a small little bit. It says, the group, orchids this week go to Lake Charles, Louisiana. The group, spearheaded by dynamic Mrs. Doretha A. Combre, ended a 10-day drive, November 28, which netted $798.50 for the EE Fund. And they had a picture with it. So in this picture, we have the members of the Lake Charles branch of the NAACP representing for the Courier EE Fund campaign of 1953. I'm going to read the full caption because I think it's only right to recognize these people that's in this picture. Raised $798.15 for EE. Members of the Lake Charles branch NAACP are shown during a recent victory celebration in Christian Baptist Church after having led the drive, which netted $798.15 for the Courier in the NAACP EE Fund. Seated, front row, left to right, Mrs. Doretha A. Combre, campaign chair lady and vice president of the branch. L.H. Conley, president. Mrs. Elizabeth Cohan, co-chair lady, and Ed Hill, treasurer. In the background are some of the 100 volunteer workers who achieved the goal. At the extreme rear left is Mrs. S.J. Young, membership chairman, and at the extreme right rear is Reverend W.C. Clark, pastor of Christian Baptist Church. Seated on the floor in the front is Robert Charles, it says Combre, but I'm almost positive that's Robert from the family Combre, who found it easy to solicit EE funds. He raised $5.70 in 1 hour. So, that is the 1953 NAACP Lake Charles branch, everyone. Is everything all right? Okay. This is a newspaper clipping right here from the Shreveport Journal, dated November 1st, 1954. The heading reads, Negro group sets fight to abolish all segregation. So I'm going to read the first and the third paragraph. The Louisiana State Conference of the National Association for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, has stated its opposition to all forms of segregation in Louisiana, including educational, public transportation, and labor unions. Mrs. Doretha Combre of Lake Charles succeeded Dr. E.A. Johnson of Natchitoches as president. Lake Charles was chosen for the 1955 meeting, dated to be decided later. So we now have Doretha Combre as the president of the state NAACP, everyone. And this is 1954. Yes. Okay. This one right here is from my very own Lake Charles American Press, dated December 31st, 1954, and it says Louisiana NAACP leader to attend national session. Mrs. Doretha Combre of Lake Charles, president of the State Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was to leave today to attend a national board meeting of the organization, which is to be held in New York City on January 2nd and 4th. It was announced today. The board will be composed of national officers and state conference presidents from throughout the nation. Mrs. Combre stated, she said that the group will discuss local and national problems and map plans for the coming year. So, before this article was published in 1954, Doretha Combre, along with Lawrence H. Conley, who was president of the Lake Charles chapter of NAACP, and many others led the fight to integrate our very own McNeese State University. Which leads me to the beginning of the fight to integrate McNeese State University. So here on the screen, I have a correspondence. It comes from a compiled book that consists of various legal documents titled File on Integration of Calcasieu Parish Schools, compiled by Ina Delahousie and Charles A. Honore. And Mr. Charles Honore presented this to our library himself because he felt it was important for us to have a copy of this. We are still in the process of getting it on the floor because there's a lot of documents to go through, but Armagie and I are working on that. But I wanted to share this with you because this truly highlights the beginning stages of Doretha in the NAACP dealing with the segregation issues at McNeese. So, as I mentioned, the letter is from Lake Charles branch of the NAACP, and it is signed off by Lawrence Conley, president, and Doretha Combre, vice president, on September 15, 1952. It was addressed to Professor J.K. Haynes. J.K. Haynes was the president of the Louisiana Colored Teachers Association, later known as the Louisiana Education Association, and he eventually became the executive secretary of the Louisiana Education Association. He was an important man. And the second person addressed in this letter is attorney A.P. Toureau, who was Alexander Pierre Toureau out of New Orleans. The document reads as follows. Dear sir, this is to advise you that the Lake Charles, it says LC, that the Lake Charles branch of the NAACP has had 6 students to apply for application blanks for admission to the John McNeese State College, only to be refused on the grounds that they are Negroes and that the college is designed for an all-white school. We were able to secure 4 application blanks, however, and they were mailed into the college over a month ago. But up to now, the students have not received a reply. Since we live in the extreme western part of the state, we are quite a distance from the nearest colored college. If we would be able to get colored students in this college, it would open the doors for many other students whose parents are unable to send their children off to school. We would appreciate your consideration on this matter and would like to have you all know that we are willing to cooperate with whatever suggestions you may offer. Here is a list of the students who applied. Mrs. Helen Crachan, Joyce Richard, Etta Matthews, Riley Hager, Franklin Guillen, and Mrs. Lanier Chandler. We are looking forward to an immediate reply. Yours truly, Lawrence and Doretha. So this is an example, this is setting the stage. We're in 1952, Doretha, NAACP, they're already trying to get this school integrated. So, I want to make sure I get us on the right track. On May 7, 1954, the ruling of the historic Civil Rights Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Topeka, Kansas took place. State-sanctioned segregation of public schools was a violation of the 14th Amendment, making it unconstitutional. And it marked the end of the separate but equal doctrine that was established by Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court case in 1896, which allowed racial segregation in public schools. The head of that legal team that led the case to victory was no other than Thurgood Marshall, who was the chief counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund during this time in 1954. And 7 years later, Thurgood Marshall would go on to become the first African-American Supreme Court justice, where he served as an associate justice from 1967 and 91. Now, Thurgood Marshall and his legal team played vital roles in changing education for African Americans throughout the segregated South. Unfortunately, many towns throughout the South resisted the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education, which led many to still fight to integrate Black students into white schools. And in Lake Charles, McNeese was one of the many education facilities that were still denying enrollment of Black students. But the Lake Charles branch of the NAACP fought to break down those barriers of discrimination that were being unfairly targeted towards these Black students who wanted to attend college in their very own city. And of course, our girl Doretha was at the forefront of this fight. Now, I know if you noticed, I have some handouts at the back table. One of these articles I have as a handout is the one to the left of the screen. So these are two different articles referencing the same story regarding African American students who were turned away at McNeese when attempting to register for summer classes in June of 1954. So the article to the left from my very own Lake Charles American Press, dated June 8, 1954, the heading reads, McNeese turns 13 colored registrants. Those are the copies I have for any and everybody to take them with you. And the article to the right is out of the Monroe News Star in Monroe, Louisiana, and the heading reads, 13 Negroes refused at McNeese State. And that is the one I want to read to y'all. The registrar at McNeese State College here refused to register 13 Negroes when they attempted to sign up today for summer classes. The registrar, Mrs. Inez Moses, told the group that she had no authority to accept applications from them. She said she was following the instructions given by L.E. Frazier, college president. Frazier said authority permitting registration of Negroes must come from the State Board of Education. He said he had not received such authority. The students were brought to the college by Mrs. Doretha Combre, chairman of the Citizens Committee of the Lake Charles branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Mrs. Combre said today's move, in the opinion of the NAACP, also was on the assumption that a court ruling legalizing enrollment of colored students at Southwestern Louisiana Institute would permit their enrollment at McNeese, since it also is state operated. We did not apply for interest based on the Supreme Court's ruling banning segregation in public schools, but on the basis of the court's ruling on the SLI case. Inasmuch as those students wanted to go to school here, there is no Negro school, and we felt that we had the right to enroll at McNeese State College. In the SLI case, a 3-judge federal court ruled that the school must admit 4 Negroes who sought admission. 3 of those attempting to register today were among the 4 involved in a lawsuit last year seeking admission to McNeese. The suit is pending. The 3 are Joyce Richard, Lenora Chandler, Hattie Coleman. Others seeking to register today were Frances Fondell, Ruthie Fondell, Barbara Fugé, Mary Jane Salas, Florence Cooper, and this is supposed to be Thelma Pujo. I looked that up. They misspelled her name there. Lucille Kane, Dolores Townsend, Marva Thibodeau, and Marshall McGowan. This was happening in our own city, y'all. And right here, this is another article I have as a handout for everyone to take. Okay. This article right here was published in the Lake Charles American Press, June 11, 1954. And I do want to acknowledge this is, our local paper was covering these stories of Black African American people here wanting change in our city. They were not shying away from these stories. So very grateful to have this all documented. So the article was published 3 days after the incident of the 13 Black students that were turned away at McNeese. The heading reads, Negroes told to get ready for integration. So I'm gonna just read portions of it. About 300 persons at a mass meeting sponsored by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People were told here last night to get ready for integration. Mrs. Combre, a community leader who was a candidate 2 years ago for the Lake Charles City School Board, is chairman of the Citizens Committee of the local NAACP chapter. She said the mass meeting was called to present facts and figures so that we may get together and work toward the common goal, integration. Mrs. Combre also discussed the refusal Monday by McNeese State College to admit 13 colored students who tried to enroll for summer classes. She said the United States Supreme Court has ruled against segregation in education and that no one has the right to question or try to invade the court's decisions. Mrs. Combre declared that the Negro does not want integration for a chance to socialize with whites, but said that Negroes could not condone segregation when the money that we pay in taxes is taken and given to support schools that we cannot attend. She said she received many telephone calls from both white and Negro people concerning the McNeese issue. She told the audience that one white mother whose daughter was registering at the time that the Negro students tried to apply for entrance to the school called her on the phone and cried because of the injustice dealt to the colored people that morning. What did I say? She was not quiet, she was not still. So, next step included the Lake Charles branch of the NAACP enlisting some enforcements, everyone. So Thurgood Marshall was enlisted by our very own Doretha Combre, Lawrence Conley, and Beatrice Chandler. I just want to give a few facts on Beatrice. She was a teacher at Sacred Heart, and her daughter, Lenora Chandler, was one of the 13 Black students that was turned away at McNeese in June of 1954. And Thurgood Marshall was brought along on this case. And guess what, y'all? He brought some friends too. Now, this was the same legal team with Brown versus Board, y'all. This is the people that Doretha NAACP got for us to come here. So, attorneys A.P. Turow, Robert L. Carter, U. Simpson Tate, who along with Thurgood Marshall filed lawsuits challenging racially motivated denial of admission of African American students at McNeese State College. And that lawsuit was filed on September 14th of 1954. So, the result of that lawsuit ended with federal judge F. Hunter Jr. ruling to end racial segregation at McNeese, allowing Black students to finally be admitted at the college. And the summer of 1954, the first Black students enrolled at McNeese State College. And according to the book, which we have that book, Margaret Fleming, Contributions of the Negro, Irma Jean's holding it up. According to that book, on May of 1956, McNeese had their first Black graduates of the college history, and the names listed in that book are Charles Harrigan, who was Doretha's son-in-law. He was the husband of Doris. Mrs. Sammy Bergeron Miller, and Dan Simon. Those are the historically recorded names. So, of course, I want to find these people so I can share this with y'all. So, we have McNeese State University yearbooks in our library. So that was the first thing I went to. So here we go. 1955 McNeese yearbook, the log, is the first time African American students are listed in the yearbook's history. And it was in the 1955 yearbook that I found Charles Harrigan appearing as a graduating senior. Now, this is his graduation picture from that yearbook, and he is listed graduating with a bachelor's in health and physical education. Also, his obituary mentioned he received a master's in science from Louisiana State University. So again, graduated 56, but this is 1955. He was the only African-American graduate in that book. And I have that book here today. So next up, now we have in 1956 McNeese log yearbook, I found Sammy Bergeron, and she graduated with a bachelor's in education. And there's actually another picture of her in that yearbook. She was listed with the International Relations Club as well. And on the 1950 census, she is listed teaching in public schools. All right, this is our next guy. So he is the third historically known African American to graduate from McNeese, and this is Dan Columbus Simon. However, his picture in the 1956 yearbook was in the junior section, but that doesn't mean he could have got his credits and graduated in 56, because again, he is documented as the graduating class. So I found his obituary. So here's some facts about Mr. Dan Simon. He earned a bachelor's degree in education from Southern University. Later attended McNeese State University, where he received his certification. He also attended Prairie View A&M University in Prairie View, Texas, where he became a professor. Now, it's another person I want to acknowledge. His name is not historically mentioned with the first African-American graduates of McNeese. However, I found him listed in the graduating seniors portion of the 1956 McNeese log yearbook, so I just wanted to acknowledge him. And his name is Solomon Webb, and he is listed graduating with a bachelor's in science and communications. And again, 1955, first time African Americans appear in the McNeese yearbooks. I have the 1955 and the 1956 yearbooks here for everyone to look at. So you can see some of the first enrolled African American students in that school. So before I go further from this portion, I want to mention another name, Samuel Jacob Young. He was mentioned in the Contributions of the Negro by Morgan Fleming. He was a member of the NAACP who was also on the front lines when fighting to end racial segregation at that college. All in all, there are numerous unsung heroes who were instrumental in desegregating McNeese as well as other schools in Calcasieu Parish. Some names we may never know, but it's important to remember the sacrifices from all of these trailblazers who demanded better equal education for all African American students here in our very own Calcasieu Parish. So, yes. So Doretha, Dardenne Combre, visionary woman of change. So I found this article. Anything I found with a picture, I wanted to share that. In January of 1956, same year of the integration case, well, when students were able to, when students graduated from McNeese, Doretha was named Most Outstanding Woman. And it was covered in the Pittsburgh Courier dated January 7, 1957. And the caption underneath reads, ranking in the top bracket amongst Louisiana women who are spearheading the cause for equality is Mrs. Doretha Alma Dardenne Combre, Lake Charles, Louisiana. She is president of both the Louisiana State Conference of the NAACP branches and the NAACP Southern Regional Advisory Group. In the article references her involvement with helping to integrate McNeese. A quote from the article states, "She led the fight to get Negroes into McNeese State College." And that same article also states, and I quote, "Directed extensive registration campaigns in the state and received a citation naming her the most outstanding woman in the community." So I found this article. I thought it was interesting to share. So it's from the Amarillo Daily News, October 16, 1957. The heading reads, "NAACP official wraps injunction." So in 1958, a Louisiana State Law, Act 26, was issued criminalizing NAACP activities in the state of Louisiana. And Doretha, who was the president of the Louisiana State NAACP, did not stay quiet on the matter. In fact, the article covers when Doretha spoke at a news conference about the injunction that was issued under the state law, was in fact politically motivated. Now, reading the whole thing, just portions. Mrs. Doretha Combre of Lake Charles, a member of the NAACP National Board of Directors, told a news conference that the injunction was issued by a district court judge in Shreveport last Friday at the demand of State Senator William J. Ranich. The injunction, issued under the terms of a Louisiana state law passed last year, prohibits the NAACP from carrying on activities in the state. Mrs. Combre said Ranich demanded assurance of the injunction in the, sorry, my stumbling. Assurance, sorry. Of the injunction in the belief that it would enhance the candidacy for governor among the state's white voters. The injunction was issued the eve of the state branch's 13th annual conference. So, but not to worry. The ban on the Louisiana NAACP was challenged in federal courts. And here on the screen is an article from the Atlanta Daily World dated February 17, 1916. The heading reads, "NAACP back in Louisiana State." The first paragraph, NAACP Executive Secretary Roy Wilkins this week called on the association's Louisiana State Conference of branches to immediately revive all activity and take up where it left off last October. The article goes on to further mention that Doretha Combre's public speech against Ranich regarding his attempts to secure white votes by silencing the NAACP in Louisiana, which ultimately failed on his part. In fact, Ranich ran a poor campaign, coming in third to Earl K. Long and Chip Morrison. It's another article I found with her. So, this was in the Lake Charles American Press, dated October 30th, 1961. The heading reads, NAACP calls for program featuring social action. Doretha is in the middle of that picture. So NAACP officers re-elected to the state offices in the NAACP during the organization's annual conference Sunday, left to right, A.J. Chapleton of New Orleans, first vice president, Mrs. Doretha A. Combre of Lake Charles, president, and Mrs. Moretta T. Brown of Lake Charles, secretary. So some of the things regarding this program of social change including encouraging more African Americans to vote and to take advantage of the civil rights won to them through courts. Ultimately, it was a program to encourage and educate Black citizens of their legal rights and how to take advantage and use them to enhance African American communities in America. And as you see, our girl, Doretha, is front and center throughout these many civil organization programs to work to better the Black communities. And all that work all these articles doesn't even scratch the surface. it's just a few things that was just documented I wanted to share with you. She accomplished so much throughout her time here. And I just wanted you to have a glimpse. And if you see, she was documented all over throughout her actions with the NAACP, representing Lake Charles, the state of Louisiana, nationally. I even found an article, I think she went overseas, she went to England. She was representing, she was everywhere. And all of that led our girl to the White House. So all of Doretha's hard work and civil rights movement led her to the White House, and the picture on the screen here that I have is from the JFK Library website here, and it captures when the representatives from the NAACP met with President John F. Kennedy at the White House on January 12, 1961, with a timestamp at 4 p.m. And Doretha's frame can be seen bottom left in the picture frame. I have an arrow. Also, too, this picture is inside of Combre Funeral Home. They allow me to take pictures of that. So, like I said before, everything I have shown all of you today does not come close to covering just how powerful Doretha was in her fight for equality for all African Americans in America. It's just a glimpse, so we can all know and understand just how phenomenal of a woman she was during her lifetime. Sadly, 7 months after Doretha met with President John F. Kennedy at the White House, her personal fight for equality came to an end. Doretha Combre passed away on May 13, 1962. Here on the screen is her obituary that was published in the Lake Charles American Press, dated May 14, 1962, and her passing was covered throughout various newspapers in different states. Just to give you an example, we have the New Pittsburgh Courier that published her passing, the Arizona Sun in Phoenix, Arizona, the Detroit Tribune in Detroit, Michigan, the Washington Afro-American in Washington, D.C., which is just the ones I have on the screen. It was also covered in the Louisiana Weekly in New Orleans and the Afro-American newspaper located in Baltimore, Maryland. In response to the passing of Doretha, in a few of the obituary notices, Clarence A. Laws, who was the Southwest Regional Secretary of the NAACP in Dallas, Texas, was quoted in a few newspapers. One of his quotes was from the New Pittsburgh Courier, where he stated, "Mrs. Combre's tireless devotion and dedication to the cause of human freedom and equality will continue to inspire and to bear rich fruit for generations to come." And that very quote rang true because Doretha Combre's legacy has evolved through continuing generations that have honored her legacy as well as followed her lead. In honor of Doretha's devotion to fighting for equality in the education system throughout the civil rights movement, Riverside Elementary School, located on Fisher-Rother Road, was renamed Doretha A. Combre Elementary School. And on October 6, 1981, the Calcasieu Parish School Board voted to rename the school. And on the screen is a newspaper clipping from the Lake Charles American Press dated October 1981 that covered the whole renaming of that school. And her son, Warren Sr., was on the school board, y'all. So she ran years before, and her son made it on that school board. So the dedication for the school's renaming took place on January 17th, 1982. This newspaper clipping, our very own Lake Charles American Press, dated January 18th, 1982, that covered the story of the school's dedication. The people in the picture from left to right, Dr. Frederick Stokely, who was the Calcasieu Parish School Board superintendent at the time, Doretha's son, Warren Combre Sr., who was also on the school board, as I mentioned, and to the right was Mrs. Annie Lee Young, who was the first principal of Riverside Elementary, were all at the renaming dedication ceremony. And in 2003, the school was renamed. Rosa W. Fondale Elementary School, that was located on 2903 Opelousas Street, merged with Doretha A. Combre Elementary School, and the school became known as Combre Fondale Elementary. And on the screen, from the Lake Charles American Press, dated August 10, 2003, the heading reads, "Home Improvements, New Faces and New Places, Fresh Facilities Await New Students in Calcasieu." Now, I thought this was only right to briefly highlight and honor the other namesake of that school, Mrs. Rosa Williams Fondale. So here's a few facts about Mrs. Rosa Fondale. She was a music teacher, and she had a music school called Rosa Fondale School of Music. She was the founder of Rosa Fondale Memorial Chapter Spiritual Radio Program. There was a weekly program that aired on the radio station KAOK for 27 years. And of course, she is the original matriarch founder of the family-owned and operated funeral home business Fondale Memorial Chapel that opened in 1965 and still around today. The Fondales, another prominent African-American family legacy here in Lake Charles, in Southwest Louisiana as well. And if you remember, there were Fondales involved in the McNeese integration case. There were Francis Fondale and Franklin Fondale. They were the children of Rosa and David Fondale. And there was a Ruthie Fondale, who was one of the plaintiffs in that case, and she was the wife of Marion Fondale, who was one of Rosa's sons. So the official ribbon cutting for the school, for the renaming of the school, happened on Tuesday, December 9, 2003. And on the screen is an article, Lake Charles American Press, dated December 10, 2003. Covering the story says, Lake Charles Mayor Randy Roach, along with students from Combre Fondale, take a tour of the new school located on Fisher-Rider Road in Lake Charles on Tuesday. So Doretha's legacy continued to live on. In fact, it lives beyond the grave. On the screen is an image of Doretha and Theophile, her husband's tombstone at Combre Memorial Park. Doretha is often featured on a Living History Cemetery tours hosted by the Arts and Humanities Council of Southwest Louisiana. These Living History Cemetery tours feature actors embodying the lives of local historical figures and educating people about the significant impacts of these historical figures that were here in Lake Charles. And she is always featured on that tour. But right here, this is why I want to acknowledge that Combre Memorial Park has many important historical figures buried there, which I just wanted to share a quick few and represent. So, left to right, we have Ulrich W. Price, who was the second generation Priceman to own and operate Price's Pharmacy. Price's Pharmacy was established here in Lake Charles in 1908 by his father, George Samuel Price, and his son, Frank Price, continued the family business after him, which lasted for over 100 years in Lake Charles. And Dr. Ulrich Price is the very first African American to be admitted into the registry of the Louisiana State Pharmaceutical Association. Next, Judge Norma Holloway Johnson, who is buried at Combre Memorial Park. She was the first African American woman to serve as Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the District Court of Columbia, and she held that position from 1997 to 2001. Fun fact about George Norma Holloway Johnson is that her mother, Beatrice Williams Holloway, supported her family by working as a cashier in Price's Pharmacy. Next, we have Reginald McWilliams Ball Sr., who created a whole empire in the 1200 block of St. John Street. He helped establish the first and only African-American trade school in our region in 1947, located at 1230 St. John. That same historic school became the famous entertainment and community venue known as Ball's Auditorium, and the locally famous Ball's Fried Chicken was founded by Mr. Reginald Ball Sr. here in 1947 and is still family owned and operated by the Balls family today. And last here on our list is Lake Charles' very own rhythm and blues legend, John Philip Baptiste, who went by Phil Phillips. He is famously known for his chart-topping hit song, Sea of Love, which charted at #2 on Billboard Hot 100s and #1 on Billboard R&B charts. Fun fact about Phil, he recorded Sea of Love right here in Lake Charles at Eddie Schuler's Gold Band record studio that was located on 313 Church Street. And again, this is just a few names that are there at Combre Memorial Park. And also, too, you see a pattern here with the connection to the Price family. So, in my opinion, the Price family true were one of the first founding Black family of entrepreneurs to migrate here to Lake Charles and build relationships with these incoming, inspiring professional Black businessmen and women here in the city. In fact, the Combres and the Prices were very close, and Doretha's son, Warren Sr., and Ulrich's son, Frank, were best friends growing up. So, and what came from these types of relationships in our community, especially during a time when we were thriving? Think about this. This is fascinating. Everything that was dealt, the civil rights movement, the injustices that was going on, North Lake Charles, I say North Lake Charles, but the Black community here, we were thriving. There were businesses. We were successful. That's amazing. So, how did they do that? It's simple. They were there for each other. And Doretha was one of the many impactful figures in our community who made sure to be there and lend a hand to anyone who needed help. I'm going to share a story that was shared with me by Warren Combre Jr. He shared with me that his godfather, when starting out early in his career, Doretha allowed him to practice his business out of the Combre Funeral Home. And that man was no other than the locally renowned dentist, Dr. Leonard C. Breeder, Jr. Our community was powerful because everyone made sure that anyone could prosper just as well as the next. This is who Doretha Combre was in her lifetime: a wife, a mother, a community leader, a civil rights champion, and a friend. But most importantly, she was a survivor. She never gave up. In fact, she stood taller throughout every battle that she took on and fought. So please take in this image of this phenomenal Black woman here on this screen, because she, Doretha Alma Dardenne Combre, is the picture of courage. And with that, I will leave you all with a quote from Doretha herself. And I hope it encourages you to continue on Doretha's fight for the injustices that are still dealt around our nation today. Examine yourself to find if there is any flaw that keeps you from being ready. Then throw it out and get ready. Thank you.